It is Tuesday, September 6th, 2022. Anthony the Third starts school on the 8th in local area. Lewis reminds me of how lucky we are to have such a distinct protective setup in the local area. He also reminds me of things that I had not learned. He learned. I did not know in someone else's version of countrymen and businessmen in languages I can't speak that are here, that are set up as some layer of protection in the local area, for which I'm grateful when it works. As of late. So with Anthony there, he got a call from one of his classmates from last year who was leaving the country to go wherever he was going. I know some of the photos of the local school shows countrymen that are in conflict elsewhere with whatever that friend was, whatever. I, in my own journey, being that I've visited multiplex as myself, and they invite me, I feel honored. I go, very diplomatic, very ambassador-like, even when it's not spoken in English, which is my native comfort zone, in languages that I cannot speak, but my presence was requested. And being that I am what I am and where I am, it then reminds me of this morning they had on the Queen of England, and she's in Scotland at the moment. In this area, they don't speak of such things. They also don't speak of emperors and kings of elsewhere. I being in a bird cage and having marital infidelity, whatever, in siblings with fatherland, homeland, and security being of utmost concern. They put on this morning this word pattern in English in a celebrity musical star, a production of some sort through the arts community, called King Princess. And I'm thinking to myself now, how would that be relatable? Well, I guess in some ways I am considered princess. I hear in other parts of the world they walk around calling themselves such. I am in Queens. If the hierarchy of a king princess, if the equivalent in Queens is Queen of Queens, I don't have a king consort in order to like rationale and have explained to my person. But if one is a queen inside of Queens, being the count of the terrain or the land, it would be Queen of Queens, not to disrupt, to challenge, to make contest or competition with anything else. But of course, one's mind goes, the Queen of Queens, to such a fanciful place. If one wears a crown and is dressed in luxury items or had some upbringing that does not look like an internment camp, which is my lifestyle, looks more like an internment camp the more I look about. Not quite sure, but again, the land being called Queens, and the marriage to I was intended not being able to go the way that it was. Um, it how do you not feed the crab whatever according to House of Dragons when there are certain things and there's different versions also because of the settlements or populations that have come in, and their wars elsewhere that are now of concern while I'm here and I not having a whatever. So I think of that. And then I think of how President Joe Biden must feel with his party. And then I also take independent time to think of former President Trump and how he must feel amongst his party. And it brings to mind not only that movie Battleship, where they have that twinning look-alike actor, but much more homeward bound to where my heart lays. And they're calling upon this one battleship, which is a museum of respectable who protected and served their country once before, and coming back out. And in that parenthetical or paradoxical, whatever, I then am thinking of the seated President Joe Biden, because not knowing what his political anything has been thus far, nor Trump's for that matter. I'm in a bird cage and these things go on around me. I also had a visitor from something UN bound, very important man from elsewhere, transactional between the MLS, the NAR, and the GRI. And again, my name translates, Nicole translates to victory, so it's Victorian in its nature. As far as Queen of Queens, I'm pretty sure that was pronounced somewhere along the way. I being in this at the moment, I noticed the list for school supplies today was only on the internet, which poses a problem for me. So I had asked Lewis to print it out, however. And then when it printed, it was in all caps. Yes, I'm not the only one who communicates in all capital, since not everybody knows capital and lowercase of a certain set of script. So here we are at thinking at the moment, and then Hoda and Jenna put on the board this, but Jenna's not there. She's replaced by some man in glasses, and they're speaking of the initial integration into the North American school system, the first act of sedition, and how unhappy the residents were about this integration. Now it feels very much internment camp here, but not just of that population, but of others. So I'm watching this. This is what I feel at the moment for bicameral. See, like, I not only look at a lens and focus of bicameral, but also bifocal, because as, like, I'm trying to think to myself, what would qualify as this king princess? Well, this particular princess in an internment camp version of how I've been dressed. In the beginning, Linda was able to dress me beautiful hats, beautiful lace socks, and the handmade from home country of the sweaters for the respectfulness of our internal house, between the Italians and the Americans, um, and how I was being raised by my internal, I don't know, the word for them, like the people that called me into this realm, Linda and Lewis. They're the ones who birthed me into this situation, and then they did treat me and try to pageant me in a respectable pageant way, um, the way the home country and the whatever Episcopalians prefer, I suppose, um, for respectful marriage to whomever was being chosen. Um, and so, um, which that story never completed because there was somebody who showed interest and came to visit that I was very interested in. But that storyline, and not that I don't know if he was the intended for me to marry, or if he was the intended to bring me to the finish line in the marriage, into our kind, and getting me into the right for the king, princess, and the queen of queens, and the queen of the cosmos, because I was to bring forth, and the Christian religion is based off of this, the Virgin Mary, however that happens, and then the Holy Spirit is involved, and so forth, brings this Christ-like child. They say Jesus, I say Je suis. They say Caesar, I say Cesar. Again, it's a matter of preference with the linguistics, um, for the thought pattern, which changes or should have some semblance of reality. But king princess, in that I was going to have this cosmologically already adorned biological timepiece, the king of the Christ king, the star of the queen of queens, the queen of the cosmos, brings forth this king star that matches my own. That's what makes it so relevant. If everybody else who thinks they have a birthday, if on some magical board of starlight with no symbols attached to it other than some just pinpoint of light on some archaic or some ultra modern technology program, if all of the people who have birth dates with no king star reference were taken away and out of the program on this imaginary board for dream work purpose, I would still remain, as would my son. That is what creates, from the delusion of time to an illusion, a visible marker of anatomical space and time, where it's no longer philosophical, but it's actuality. It's no longer fiction and some literal translation, but it is the embodiment of space and time and the marking of in space and time for planning purposes. That is so much more significant than birthdays. However, my person has not been treated as a caged bird, has not been treated with the respect that I would expect out of humanity and out of those who just have birthdays, with no king star reference, with no king princess, with no queen of queens, with no queen of the cosmos. There are, I'm assuming, others that were gifted this level of spiritual awakening or atonement or knowledge. I just don't have access to them. That's part of this caged bird, where they've literally almost wiped humanity away completely all of their thoughts, their desires, their wants, their accomplishments, and have left me in isolation. It's almost like being on a planet all by myself. It's like being up on that big board, knowing I have this extremely important cosmological event. And I know that there's somewhere, some office in the world that specializes in this and the keeping of the ark of this covenant and in the keeping of the safety of the known children and what they use for market maker purposes, or that's what it's become of the words they use as of late in this area. But while they keep me in this cage and they plan their markets and they plan their invasions and they plan their wars and they plan and plan and plan and they make agendas and they swap money, they swap prisoners, they swap all sorts of things. There has not been a real king's consort effort, I believe, to get me to the boy that had shown interest in me and was my national family member. And I only say that word boy because he and I were children. And in this area, they have wiped away all of humanity in they're not important. So this way, for one moment, I can share one story without feeding crabs, without starting wars, and without competition or contest breaking out in some ridiculous whatever. This is how, at the moment, for bicameral and bifocal, when I see this movie, which is The Hobbit, and there's an orc, O-R-K, which again, oligarch, I'm not going to say what country, and the word king, it looks like from the us in the US, and looking at it from both President Joe Biden in a respectful light, and then independently looking at it through the eyes of President Trump in a respectful light, knowing that they both are part of a system. I don't know how it was constructed. I have not been a whatever. I'm here. They know of me. I don't necessarily have the reciprocatory education on them necessarily because of the way my cage bird has been held and the necessity of having a sire for my children that at this point has been withheld. I see as an independent with a relationship to another human that I have not really met or spent time with, being President Joe Biden, and then same looking at it from a former President Trump, in the political arena of things. This is where I feel 2022 has led, not because I wanted it to be, not because I don't believe they wanted to ever be like this, but it feels in North America, after whatever historic whatever took place that turned this place into what looks like an internment camp, on the political front, being called to that level of service of president of the us of the United States, must feel and look very much like this. And I do not envy, but I do, in my quietness here, appreciate the fact that they even stepped up in order to serve in some function. I would imagine being a family member and working in any form of state department for the Department of Justice. Whenever you come upon another human in this day and age, this must be how it feels to work in those fields. There are a lot of pieces that go into storytelling. That is a piece. The date on that was 2013. It's called The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smog. As a reference, I don't know, again, production companies, theatrical protections and veils that they wear. I don't know. I see the stories being presented, and I'm trying to use the tools that they have put in the field to explain what has kept me from where I needed to be. I mean, at this point, the King Star that I birthed as King Princess or Queen of Queens or whichever, however the English word is used, I do not know. But if I have to bring forth such words, I saw yesterday President Zelensky in Ukraine, his children are in hiding at the moment. I don't know if that's how the humans are placating their own positions and what they're telling themselves as to how they've torn Alex from my side and how they've made my situation that much worse in these areas. And then I see this Taylor Hawkins died and his son, and I see what beautiful music and artwork he makes. Do not for 1 second put Tia Frio 1975 in that category. There is a whole lot of disrespect and there is no semblance of anything that resembles normal or okay in the situation that I've been forced into further in this cage. Now, this is interesting. This next visual artist's rendery and visual reference is called House of Dragons, Season 1, Episode 3, where this version of a queen with out in the field, they come upon a white stag. They let the white stag go, and then it is a conversation between the king, her father, and herself about not being supplanted. Now, I find that interesting because in my world, James is the word supplant. There is a paradox. It was not this when I went to Canada, or when I was around the Canadians in this exit, EXIT, and I walked into the ballroom gala by myself. And I walked across the ballroom floor by myself. I did not at the time feel like I was in the middle of battle and that I was adorned in blood. But I have a feeling some people seated at tables in that very real room knew a different version of story and knew a very much realistic view of how I was born into whom I was to become and what was being kept. Even though my bird was in a cage with them at the moment, them being of higher influence and power than myself at the moment. But that is what this reminds me of.
Come sit, Prince. Give a grace some peace.
But I swear to you now, on your mother's memory, you will not be supplanted.
Now, this today with Hoda and Jenna is episode 176.
They couldn't have wiped off the ad at the market.
It's that time of year. Kids all over the country are headed back to school. But for Ruby Bridges, her first day of first grade changed the course of history.
We are going to catch up with the civil rights icon in just a moment. But first, let's hear a little bit of her story in her own words outside of the very same school building where she made history 62 years ago. Take a look.
You'll boycott any school that is integrated.
I feel like I remember everything, even.
Okay, so that was the will of the people. They did not want this integration. I saw Missouri the other day, or maybe it was Mississippi, I can't quite remember. They put up a clip as well. The land folk, the business owners, the people that had lives in this country did not want whatever was promoting and pushing this integration and this seditious, mutinous behavior. And now here we are. This particular reference is 62 years later. And now I am trapped in these lands, almost in some internment camp looking. I have, in my area, it's not this, although that is working with what is here that Lewis says I need to be respectful of, which I am. The TL character that came to visit me, I was very respectful with he. We shared a meal in a restaurant in a almost internment-like level of dining institution, just so nobody else gets that. I mean, there was a JC that I also ate with in a pizzeria, which is also, it's not like a 5-star Michelin anything. It's not even close. It's like third world nation. It's a step above third world nation because there is some form of modern mechanics to it in cleanliness. But it really is, for my king princess standard, so far off from when you hear Queen of Queens. One's mind's eye goes to fanciful building of uniform and showering one with affection, appreciation, and whatever, and respect.
Even though I was 6 years old, I think that if anyone had actually gone through that as a child, that you would never forget it.
On November 14th, 1960, Ruby Bridges became the first African American child to integrate William Frantz Elementary School in New Orleans.
I remember the federal marshals.
So in Louisiana, my father's name is Louis. My father's name is Louis. Nicholas Francis, in whatever that was to mean. Anthony, I don't know his middle names. They have not been pronounced to my person. I don't have access to his importance. But prior to he was Nicholas or Nicola.
Marshals knocking at the door and me standing there and wondering who they were. My parents never explained anything to me. I was only told that I was going to go to a new school and that I needed to behave. There were people lining the streets, and I remember that they were chanting. There were police officers.
They made motion, they made action, they made themselves known. Now I'm here. I have cosmological importance amongst a more global community of respectful individuals that are concerned about climate and climate change, that are also worried about future generations based on the heat, the quality of the air, the quality of the water, the quality of a lot of different things. Labor and future labor is all congested into this importance way of speaking that I'm being totally left out of, as the world here is just almost pretending as if I don't exist, or functioning in some manner that has consequences. I just don't know how to voice my most sincere concerns. Now here's back to House of the Dragons and feeding the crab. Now, in Game of Thrones, HBO also put that one out. There's the Mother of Dragons, and she has 3 in her nest. Down this way, forced. I also had, at that time, 3. In an EO, me. Io. Io mio. In this scene, prior to this, they are nailing people to the beach and letting the crabs come up and rip the flesh from these characters. It's quite gruesome. So this is the only piece that I'm putting up there. I know, again, medicinal, in medicated, and in doctoral ways of some of the health issues I've been going through personally with whatever this is that's healing but never heals just right. And going back to like the crabby nature of things, and vengeance being what it is. Not that I have it, just like I don't have that competitive edge. I just have no desire for any of it, quite frankly. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way universe, galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.